Hey, this is Mike from the Graphic Novel Show. Are you interested in starting and running your own podcast? Well, you know, this is the second one that we've done. We used to do a different one, and we decided to start this one. And last time we used Anchor, and you know what? We decided to go back with Anchor again because they are the easiest way to make a podcast. They give you everything you need in one place for free. You can do it right from your phone or on your computer. Anchor gives you creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. You can do that right from your phone. That's quite amazing. They'll also distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Now, what you need to do is go download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hi, I'm Parker, and I use they, them pronouns.
And I am Mike. I use he, him pronouns.
And welcome to the Graphic
Novel Podcast. This is a show where we discuss graphic novels, zines, and other comics. We throw in a bit of real life to make it real.
We talk about some queer issues, race issues, death, relationships.
All kinds of good stuff. Every week we have a new episode. And if you like our show, we'd love it if you went on Apple Podcasts and gave us 5 stars, or went on Spotify or YouTube, any of those places, and just give us a good rating.
You can subscribe, and that way, as soon as this goes live, it's going to show up in your feed, and you get access to it right away. And share it with your friends. That's how we get the word out, and the podcast grows.
Definitely. You can interact with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Insta. And if you really want to, you can visit us at anchor.fm/graphic novel podcast and can leave us a voice message. So how are you today, Parker?
I'm surviving.
Yeah?
How about you?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's beautiful out. We're working towards an 80-degree weather, 80-degree weekend. I mean, I have to work in a bus all weekend, but it's going to be nice being out on the road.
I do not look forward to the 80 degrees.
Oh, I can't wait. My only concern is that it's going to be nice out and there's going to be a lot more people taking the bus that don't need to be riding.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. So I don't think there's any two ways around that. We just have to deal with it.
At least for the most part, they're not in the front with you.
No, they are not in the front with me. That is good. You know, once in a while, an ADA or something like that. But those people need to get in there. So,
you know, it would really be more fair to put ADA seats also in by the back door.
Well, the way that the buses were set up was that there was ADA in the front, bikes in the back. That's why.
So they could
on the other kind of bus, there's really some of the doors are not wide enough for.
Do they all kneel or they kneel forward, right? Not to the side?
Forward.
Okay.
They only kneel, the front end kneels down. It's praying to something. I don't know what the fuck it's doing. It's only good if you're using the front door.
Right.
We're supposed to kneel it at this one station. And I'm like, why do I kneel it here? Because nobody can get in the front door anyhow. And now, unless I'm letting an ADA person on, I don't kneel it.
Oh.
Nobody said anything until this point. I don't usually kneel it anyhow. Even before this, I didn't because I didn't want to. The station is not the same.
That's terrible.
It's not like it's 6 feet and they gotta jump into the bus.
Yeah, but if they're ADA, how do you know if they struggle to get on?
If they're ADA, I would.
How would you know? You can't look at somebody and know.
I put a ramp down. That's all.
But what if they're not in need of a ramp, but they can't
I will lower it. I'm sitting there. I can tell. Usually by the way somebody's walking, whether they're, if they're walking slow or anything like that. You can tell if they're struggling. They're struggling like they're trying to climb up, and I'm like, and they're like, oh, I can't get in. I'm like, oh,
you start cheering them on.
Sorry.
Like, wow.
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it.
I guess I'll put it down if I have to. I have to push this button.
That's right.
And then we wait a whole millisecond for it to kneel down for you.
That is exactly it. I don't know how you knew that.
Why is it such a struggle to kneel a bus?
It's not a struggle.
So why don't you just do it?
Because it's a pain.
What's a pain about it? You just push a button, right?
2 buttons.
You don't actually have to get down and crank it down,
I
right?
do. On some of the buses you do. You got to get down on your knees and you got to go.
You have to personally crank it down. I mean, then I could understand not
I have to
doing
pedal.
it.
I have to pedal to bring it down.
Well, it gets you a little exercise.
Yeah, just a little bit. All right. So today we've got a little bit of news, one relatively quick review, and then our long review of Persepolis, which is going to be interesting. 20-year-old book. I just realized it was that old, but
it's historical, so it doesn't.
Yes,
I mean it's always going to be good.
Exactly. It's never going to age because of the content,
right?
But also, just found out that there's a 95-minute animated movie that we're going to watch.
Yes,
which should be amazing. So,
what do you think? Kid appropriate? Have you looked at it at all?
It has to be.
It doesn't have to be.
You're right. It doesn't have to be, but we'll find out. But let's start out with something else here. All right. There are still new books coming out during all this, and one of them, I think, I don't know if we should tie this together. I think we'll just do the review of this one. But we're going to be doing a review of one book here, but there's a new one coming out by an original sci-fi mystery graphic novel and playing cards. For over 2 years, best-selling writers Jeff Lemire, which we read, what was the frog book? Frog Catchers. Matt Kint from Bang Mind Management, and internationally acclaimed artist David Rubin from Ether and Beowulf have worked in secret in an all-new original graphic novel. The book, titled Cosmic Detective, is an epic science fiction mystery that asks, when a god is murdered, who solves the crime? I wanted to make a joke, but I won't. In Cosmic Detective, a god is found dead. Foul play is suspected, but who investigates the murder of a god? Not just anyone. That's for damn sure. Enter our detective. He's got a wife, a kid, and a seemingly normal day job as a private eye. But for years, he's been working for a secret underground cabal of shadowy figures, an organization committed to an uneasy alliance with cosmic forces beyond our imagining. So, sounds like a cool book. It is coming out right now. It's a Kickstarter campaign. It's live now, and they are working to get this. Let's just check real quick the Kickstarter, see how far they are. Of course, it won't let me in because I've got a login, so I guess we won't do that. But yeah, so it's Kickstarter. It's called Cosmic Detective. If you're interested in checking that book out. And all right, the other thing I'm going to do is a review of a book that we got a preview from. Who is the preview from? I don't even know.
Somebody special, I'm sure.
Well, it's a Comixology book, and a Comixology original, 140-page graphic novel. When it was released on April 8th, they released it for a promotional price of 99 cents, which sounds great. I mean, I've released some of my novels for 99 cents, and for free for that matter. I've given away hundreds of copies, and sometimes that's how you got to do to get people interested in your work. Quarter Killer imagines a world where the lines between the real world and simulation video games and addiction have been blurred. And let's see, the co-writers Vita Ayala and Danny Lohr, and artist Jamie Jones, and letterer Ryan Ferrier all work together. And they said that Quarter Killer is about being more than what people have decided you are, about choosing your family and living by your own code. It all starts with a girl armed with a handful of quarters looking for a legend. In Quarter Killer, Quentin Kidd, a.k.a. QK, or Quarter Killer, is an ex-corporate computer hacker who offers their services to those willing to pay them with old-school currency, specifically quarters, because quarters are untraceable. QK has only 2 rules. They don't work for criminals or the police, and there's no killing. Let's see. So basically what happens is this young girl is looking for her her father, and she goes to Quentin, says, "Hey, I need you." He said, "If I'm ever missing or you ever need help, take a handful of these quarters and go find QK."
Jeez.
And so that's what they do. She goes and she finds QK, who agrees to help her. You find out throughout the story that turns out they're actually related. So the girl doesn't know this at the beginning of the story. She doesn't know this, but that's why he's willing to go out of his way for this kid. The rest of his group is not, his gang is not thrilled with helping this little girl find her daddy.
Right.
But it's a good story, and it's these are I believe they're primarily black creators, and the artwork is very like graffiti like, and it's very cool, full color. Like I said, it's 140 pages, and I really liked it. It's good. There's a lot of action, a lot of good stuff going on. Makes it a good, entertaining, little different type story. So it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, sounds good.
So Comixology, Quarter Killers. Check that one out if you're looking for something interesting. All right. Let's see. I think that takes care of most of what we're working with here. So next, we're going to get on to our main attraction today.
This week, we read Persepolis, a story of a childhood. Why is my sound so low all of a sudden?
I think it's just you.
I'm just low.
Marjane Sahtrapi.
Sahtrapi. I thought I decided
Sahtrapi.
Marjane Sahtrapi.
Sahtrapi.
We work really.
I know.
We work hard sometimes.
And I wrote it down too, and I still said it wrong. Sahtrapi.
I know. Anyway, so in this powerful black and white comic strip, Sahtrapi tells the story of her life in Tehran from ages 6 to 14, years that saw the overthrow of the Shah's regime, the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, and the devastating effects of war with Iraq. The intelligent and outspoken only child of committed Marxists and the great-granddaughter of one of Iran's last emperors, Marjane bears witness to a childhood uniquely entwined with the history of her country.
She was born in 1969. She's an Iranian artist and writer whose graphic novels explore the gaps and junctures between East and West. Let's see, you already said that. Her father was an engineer and her mother was a clothing designer. She grew up in Tehran and attended the Lycée François. After the Iranian Revolution, her family's Western way of life drew the attention of Iranian authorities. And that's kind of, first book kind of takes care of all that. We're having a fun time today. We've got animal attack and children have to go on pee-pee, and it's a fun fun day of recording. Anyhow,
I like the pee-pee, not that they had to use the toilet. No, they had to go pee-pee.
That's what it was. But I couldn't remember because I read this last year, and this was book 1, and I read book 2, and I couldn't remember because I remember the story, and as I was reading a little review of her, I realized that I'd read both of them because it kind of all blended together.
Yeah, I kind of like that I have only read the one, and I didn't deep dive into any. Sometimes I get really hyper focused and go into the stories of the creators and stuff, and I didn't want to do that this time, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't because it's such an old book, 20 years.
Yeah,
I had no idea reading it that it was 20 years old. You can't tell, you know.
She, so Marjane is also a film director. She just last year directed Radioactive, which is about Marie Curie, and that was her biggest movie that she had done up to this time. And she did some others, and she won awards because, as we mentioned earlier, Persepolis was turned into an animated movie, which won the Cannes Jury Prize in 2007. It won in 2008, won the César Award for Best First Feature Film. It won the award for Best Writing Adaptation. Also won in 2007 the Sutherland Trophy for Persepolis. So she's won a lot of awards for
that's great
for this one particular story, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why don't we dive into this a little? I mean, this is a different one because we have no comparison to what she's gone through.
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, we
Life.
can't. As far as life goes, you can't unless you were growing up there. You can't really compare your life. You know, we come from a place of privilege. We were both born and raised here.
Right.
You know, we didn't experience war. You
Right.
know,
And if you look at old, you can see, and you've seen them on, they pop up on the internet every once in a while. Pictures from the 70s before the revolution. Women with short skirts dressed in modern clothing. They were very modern. The country was very modern.
Oh yeah.
And when the revolution took place, everything like was thrown out the window basically. I wrote notes down because the book is extremely detailed. There's so much in it. It's not like Bix that we read a few weeks back where you read the photos. Here it's pictures and a lot of words, and it's all a combined story.
Right.
So I mean, one thing you got to take away is that after the revolution, religion became very important in the country. Not for her. She was always religious, she said.
Yes, that she thought she thought.
Yeah,
she was gonna be a prophet.
Oh, she wanted to be a prophet, but she wouldn't tell anybody else that. She told her parents she was going to be a doctor.
Oh yeah, that's what you tell people.
But she spoke to God every night too.
Yes, her drawings of her
and God.
And God. Yeah.
And there were times when she was angry and God would still visit and she'd be like, I don't want to talk to you. And he's like, well, the weather tomorrow is going to be, she's like, I don't really want to talk. But it was,
it's hard to read things like that personally. I mean, I don't want to ever say that somebody's reality is not reality.
Well, okay, she was brought up religious.
Right.
And so she believes in her religion. And whether she believes she was talking to God or not, she was a kid.
And it got her through.
Yes, she was a young child at the time.
But it's interesting to me because when I see things like that, my assumption is that her parents were very religious and instilled upon her, but it doesn't sound like that was the case.
No, I mean, even later on, even her grandmother hated what happened because the family had money. The grandfather had been an emperor or a prince or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So he was one of the last before all of this took place. I mean, they took all their wealth. They went into his house and took everything, even, good wood, the tiles out of the bathrooms, everything.
Take whatever you want.
Make sure you take, well, he didn't say that. They went
No.
Oh,
yes. Yeah. The raiders.
Yes, they made sure that they made sure that nobody was too high, I guess it was. And no one was too wealthy to bow down to, to the leaders.
Right.
But,
and I also want to say before we get too deep into it, I knew very little of this history. I kind of had some idea of kind of the generalities,
right?
But I have I'm completely ignorant to the history here, and especially reading this. But it didn't make it difficult for me to follow. It didn't make it, it was heartbreaking and inspiring and everything all at once.
Oh yeah. And the second book is interesting because it's a little bit more about her, I think, and less about the religious culture and all that. It's more about her like going downhill and everything.
Well, I think that this is a lot about her life too.
It definitely
it's just but it played such a huge role in. I mean, it was the war happening, the revolution was her life. I mean, she talks about what at one point she punches or hits the principal or something. And I'm like, what a fucking badass.
Yeah.
Like, that is so awesome.
Yeah.
And she stands up in class and says, this isn't actually how it went down. You know, like those kind of things that like inspire me so much. Like, I wish I could have been that kid.
No, I agree. And where she was, that was like that was dangerous.
you don't want to stand up. You don't want to stick out. You want to, stay in the crowd and, get through. Keep your head down and just get through.
Well, you're saying this, so I'll go. It jumps ahead, but
It does. I'm sorry.
No. But what you're saying is, at one point, all of a sudden they closed the schools because they said, nobody needs to learn right now. And then when they reopened them, first of all, the women all had to wear veils.
The veils,
the
right,
girls
right.
too, who like one day they're in a French school learning French and everything, and the next day they're wearing veils and everything's about religion. And
they don't understand the veils too. It's like some joke.
Yes, they're playing around.
They don't explain why they have to. They just say, "Put this on."
And in their school books, suddenly, like the supreme leaders, the Shah and everything, there's photos of them, and this is important.
God chose this person. Yeah.
Yes, and then when things changed and they came back and they were told to tear out the photos of him, she's the one who spoke up and said, teacher, you're the one who told us that this person was important. And she spoke up like often because her parents didn't tell her to be quiet. They brought her up.
You're right. They didn't silence her off, and it didn't seem like through the book. Obviously what the reality was may have been a little different, but it seemed like she was a valued part of the family, as opposed to the way most children are. Sit down, shut up, and do what I say.
Well, because it was a dangerous time, and they could have done that, and a lot of people probably did.
Probably
because you don't want to stand out during that time because they.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about neighbors who.
Well, yes, the one
and family members for that matter.
A 16-year-olds with guns stopping cars. And,
well, how was it 14-year-olds were being sent off to war.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Just fucking heartbreaking.
But I mean, you got like 16-year-olds stopping cars. They went and got alcohol, and they were stopped, and the mother.
Oh, that's right. This is toward the end.
Her and her mother.
Yeah.
Are trying to bring the alcohol in while the father distracts this kid.
No, they hadn't gone and gotten alcohol. They had been at a party,
but they had
and
alcohol
parties
in
weren't
the house.
allowed.
Yes, they had alcohol in the house, though.
They had alcohol in the house, and the kid. I mean, he was a kid, but he was
a soldier.
He says, "Well, if you weren't drinking," because the father says, "I wasn't drinking."
That's right.
And he said, "Okay, well, if you weren't drinking, then you'll take me to your house because there won't be anything there." And he's like, "Right, okay." So he tries to get the grandmother. Was it the grandmother?
I thought it was just the mother, or maybe it was the grandmother and
I think it was the grandmother and the daughter.
Okay.
Not
Marjane.
Yes, who ran into the house.
Okay.
Marjane and the grandmother ran into the house to try and flush everything.
And they did.
Yes. But the father had convinced the soldiers that, he paid them off. He bribed them. That's right. He bribed them so they didn't come in. They're like, oh, you flushed it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, yeah, we did.
Exactly. But I mean, it was a very confusing and dangerous time. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
They're looking at a neighbor walking across the street, and they're like, last year she was wearing skirts above her knees. Now she thinks she's all great in the head to toe covered veil thing,
Yeah.
Because they're trying to basically kiss ass to the religious leaders.
But are they trying to kiss ass, or are they just trying to survive?
Stay hidden.
Yeah.
Maybe, possibly. So let's see some of my notes here. Again, when all this revolution started, her parents demonstrated on a regular basis.
Yes,
they were very big on that. She was young and she didn't quite understand it, but they bought her tons of books so she could learn about the history of Iran.
Yeah, her room was not filled with toys; it was filled with books.
Yes, and she read everything and learned so much, and found out that her grandfather was imprisoned for some years. She thought that he was on a long trip.
Yeah, it was like finally she was old enough to kind of grasp it a little bit. And so they kind of gave her some of that family history that they didn't feel like she was old enough to grasp yet.
Yeah, and her grandfather would be put in a cell full of water for hours on end. So one night she decided, not long after this, she learned about this, to take a bath. And she just sat in there for hours because she wanted to feel what it would have been like for her grandfather to just have to sit in water for hours.
Yeah.
Until the water got cold. She didn't, as soon as it starts getting cool, I turn hot water on.
Yeah.
But as a young child, she wanted to experience this.
It was brilliant. Just brilliant.
Yeah, it was very important.
Yeah.
And there's just so much. The art, where did I write about it? The art is, it captures the feeling and the mood of the people amazingly well.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Really
for sure.
well.
For sure.
It concentrates more on people. The backgrounds are minimal in many scenes. If
Yep.
you look, they're white or they're black.
Yep.
When there is a background, it's for a reason. It has something to do with
Yeah,
the
look
scene.
carefully at the scene. Look at every little
Mhm.
detail because it tells you a lot.
Yes, it does. Another thing, their family had a maid. Their father drove a Cadillac. Her father drove a Cadillac. And she realizes that there were social differences between her and other people, including her maid. And she felt shame.
Yeah, the maid didn't eat dinner with them, and she noticed that was something.
Yes, when
At
you're
such
young,
a young age too.
But when she was before a lot of this happened, it wasn't a big deal. It was like the maid was just like there, like the nanny kind of thing. But then she realizes that suddenly there's a difference. Like, we're driving in a Cadillac, and none of my friends are driving in Cadillacs, and our maid is here, but she doesn't eat with me, you know. And then as the story goes on, you find out that the maid is also illiterate, and
yeah, apparently the mother had tried to teach her, but it didn't take.
Yes, like she would say bread, and she'd say carrots. You know, like completely different. Did not grasp it at all.
Which makes me wonder: is it that she didn't? You know, it was like a choice to not fall into another command kind of thing. You know what I'm trying to say? Maybe not. Maybe I'm looking too much into it.
I'm not sure if you're wrong about that, but I'm just looking at something here. I realized that I mentioned the Shah earlier. It wasn't the Shah. The Shah was who was overthrown. The Shah of Iran was overthrown.
Right.
Khomeini. I remember him, though. Ayatollah Khomeini. That's right. He was the leader. He was the one that came in, and this whole thing happened. In November 4th, 1979, 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage for 444 days. From November 4th, 79 until January 20th, 81.
Wow.
They were held hostage after a group of Iranian college students belonging to the Muslim student followers of the Imam's line who supported the Iranian Revolution. They took over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. 79, I was in high school, but I remember this. This was a big deal in the news. It was like on all the time.
I hope so.
It was on all the time. Jimmy Carter was president. 8 servicemen and 1 Iranian civilian were killed during the attempt to rescue the hostages. As Marjane's father says in the story, I think it was in there, wasn't he? Talks about the Americans. The Americans really only cared about oil when that's the reason that the Americans cared about what was going on.
Yep. And
that's why they took, that's part of this whole thing. Jimmy Carter supposedly he called the hostage taking an act of blackmail, and the hostages were victims of terrorism and anarchy. But in Iran, it was widely seen as an act against the U.S. and its influence, including its perceived attempts to undermine the revolution and its long-time support of the Shah of Iran, who was overthrown in 1979. After he was overthrown, he was admitted to the U.S. for cancer treatment, blah, blah, blah. But he went to Egypt, which she talks about too. Went to Egypt because she said, wasn't it because his first wife was Egyptian or something like that? But he died in 1980, anyhow, before the crisis was even over. It was not a good thing. The whole time was not a good thing. I mean, it depends. I guess if you were in Iran and you were okay with what was going on, but she was not. She was like, she would grow to become a fan of like punk music and stuff like that. I mean, she was not of the same cloth as a lot of the people. Her parents were westernized. Her father was an engineer. He was a smart man.
Mm-hmm.
What else? You do read quite a bit about torture and political prisoners,
right?
And there's some detailed things about torture. How the one guy just nonchalantly talks about how they yanked all of his fingernails out at one point.
Oh yeah,
he's talking with another former prisoner, and he's like, "Yeah, but look, they're growing back pretty good now."
Yeah. And the emotional toll that takes, I mean, obviously physical toll, but the emotional toll, and then to just talk about it like it's just something everybody handled, everybody had to deal with. You know what I mean?
And at one point when she was young, she's upset because all of her friends have fathers that are heroes. He died as a pilot, or he's in prison. He's a hero. And she's like, my father's just an engineer. He's no hero. Then she finds out about her grandfather and her uncle who had been a political prisoner and who eventually was killed.
Now, see that is
that's
the kid part of her, which there's very little of it, honestly. I mean, but that reminds you that she's still a child. To think everybody else has his hero. I don't have a hero in my life.
Exactly.
That's such a typical kid thing. I mean, obviously not hero part of it, but feeling like everybody has something and I don't.
Yeah, and a lot of time. And so she wrote this great paper too in class that she thought was great. Then the teacher calls up the kid whose father died, and she reads this thing, and everybody's crying, and she's like, "All right, so her paper was better, but I still don't have a hero," kind of thing,
Yeah.
Like, why is her dead? But then the girl also says she goes and not apologizes, but she gives her condolences, like out in the play yard.
Right.
And she says, I wish my dad was here and in prison instead of a hero and dead or whatever,
Right.
So, and that probably, she remembered that. So it was obviously important. It stuck in her, like, yeah, maybe having a hero is not that great of a thing because her uncle ends up getting killed.
Well, I mean, and it's one of those things that as an adult, I mean, it's like you don't talk ill of the dead kind of thing, right? Like you realize that what you're saying isn't necessarily, you're saying it so that you feel better about the situation. You don't feel great about somebody in your family dying, tortured and miserable and hurt. And so if you change the frame of mind to say that they died a hero, they died for their country, then it kind of changes, it attempts to change the mindset a little bit. But as a child, you don't understand that. You just think, oh yeah, hero. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's see. Eventually at some point her friends and some of her family, a good chunk of her family actually left the country. They went to the US, they moved. Before things got real bad, before it was impossible to get passports. But her family doesn't. I'm kind of surprised considering they were well off, and I don't know why they didn't leave, considering a lot of their family did leave.
Yeah, I wonder if part of it was that they
wanted to fight. They wanted to continue to because they
were protesting. He was taking photos, and I think that they felt that they were needed there, and
maybe
I think a lot of it they kept her shielded from the protests and stuff. They recognized what danger that they were putting themselves in, but they felt like they were needed there. That's where they were supposed to be.
And maybe because the uncle had been a political prisoner, he sacrificed himself for this cause, and the grandfather had lost everything because of this, and maybe they felt that they needed to stay there.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we're just speculating, obviously.
Yes, we're speculating, and maybe when we watch the movie, we'll find out more.
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch the movie before we did this, though.
Yeah, no.
I wanted to because the movie looks really good.
Like I said, I like to come in with fresh eyes.
Yes. So another thing, there's war then too. You've got this revolution, but then a war starts with Iraq. I mean, and that makes it even worse. You've got this revolution going on, then you've got Iraq bombing, and air raid siren and bombing going on, and people not knowing if their neighbors are dead,
and they go from at one point early on in that to when the siren goes off, you go to the basement, you seek shelter.
And she does a great depiction of these floors of stairs and people just running up and down these stairs. And it's just the stairs you see 4 or 5, floors.
It's so basic and yet so deep all at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So dark. Yeah. And but then toward toward the end of the book, it's like, it doesn't matter, at this point, it doesn't matter if we're on the ceiling or we're in the basement, we might as well be on the roof if they drop these bombs. It's not going to matter. So the feelings around it kind of shift a little bit.
Right. And another thing, going about the artwork again, and one of these, when I took my comic book class earlier in the year, we all brought in examples of stuff we liked, and one of the instructors brought in this, and you
had already read it.
I had read it, but I hadn't read it the way they read it, because being artists, they see things a little differently.
That's huge. That is huge. I know any artist friend that I've talked to, the things that they notice that they pick up, it's like, you don't see it until it's pointed out to you. And I wish I had that eye too, because it's so hard to find those things sometimes.
It's like I was telling you that I've been listening to the Sopranos podcast, and Michael, who played Christopher in the Sopranos, has directed a bunch of movies. So he looks at the episodes now with a different eye than when he was in it too. Because when you're in it, you're doing it, and you can't see the big picture, and you don't see everything either. Now you're looking at the finished thing, and he's watching like scene cuts and noticing like, oh, that edit there, that was really good. The way they went from dark to light, stuff like that.
Right. In the details.
Yes. So the one thing that my instructor had pointed out, and when I went back and looked at it, it's really quite amazing how Margie draws these scenes of death and chaos very vividly. Sometimes they're abstract, but you always know what's happening. If you open page 89 there, there's these flames like directing all the traffic, like, because everybody's trying to leave, and it's like this, everybody just moving, trying to get out of town, and these flames are like just pushing them kind of that way.
Every border town was targeted by bombers. Most of the people living in those areas had to flee northward, far from the Iraqi missiles. Yeah.
If you go to 102, then.
Oh yeah.
What's that? Is that the? Okay, this is the most. It's kind of disturbing once you really look at it. It's a picture of how a friend of hers, right, is telling them about. Isn't that what happened in that?
Right. Well, it's talking about Mrs. Nasreen's son, her maid.
Oh, okay.
The key to paradise was given to these young kids, 13, 14 years old. And it says the key to paradise was for poor people. Thousands of young kids promised a better life, exploded on the minefields with their keys around their necks.
And in the picture, there's two pictures. The top picture has no details, but they're like the pictures of the people being blown up, these young kids. They're just solid black.
Yeah, make sure that you say kids. They aren't people, they're children.
They're children.
They're children.
They're young kids. And they're all solid black, like a shadow. And they're like in all these different positions as they're like flying, like a bomb exploding and threw them all over.
Right.
But at the bottom picture is Margie says, meanwhile, I got to go to my first party. Not only did my mom let me go, she also knitted me a sweater full of holes and made me a necklace with chains and nails. Punk rock was in. And if you look at the pictures and you compare the top to the bottom, there's these kids, all these punk rock kids dancing in all these funky positions. Not much different than these kids that were blown up, and thrown all over the place by these bombs.
With
and
their keys to paradise around their neck.
And the just the comparison of the two and how abstract it really is.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue what this means. I don't have a clue what I wrote.
You can't.
I know what I wrote, but I don't know what it means.
Oh.
This is about the we already talked about the liquor and stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, there's just it's really an amazing, detailed story of this. Oh, this other thing. Let's talk about the her parents. Her parents decided to go on a trip without her. They wanted to go on like a weekend,
which seems so strange to me.
You would think, yes. She's a little older now. She's in her teens. She's a young teenager.
Yeah.
but they decide to go, and she's like into rock and roll and punk rock and stuff. So what her parents do? They go to where'd they go? They got passports. You know where they're going?
I don't remember.
I have no idea. But Istanbul, Turkey. That's right. They went to Turkey. They went to Istanbul, Turkey. And they said one of the first thing after they got there, they went to buy posters for her. And so they bought these posters, but they knew, they're like, we can't bring these rock and roll posters back with us. As soon as we get to customs, they're going to confiscate them, and they'll probably arrest us too for having this rock and roll stuff. So what her mother did, because her mother was a clothing designer, she took apart her father's lawn coat and took the lining out and put these posters into the lining, sewed it back in, and then her father wore it with these weird straight up.
Oh, they weren't weird. They were fashionable. It just looks like shoulder pads.
He's like, you sure I look normal? And she's like, you just look like you're wearing shoulder pads. It's stylish.
It's stylish.
But again, the artwork, it's very simple. There's the backgrounds, there's nothing. But in some of the panels, the mother's not even in the panel, but she's talking. And you could see her, like it points off the panel to her talking. And then, she gets these posters. When they get back, her mother tears it apart and opens the coat up, and there's these posters for her. And it's cool. And, and by the end of the book, things are changing, and they decide it's time for her to get away from the area.
Yeah.
And they send her to Austria. And, it's the second book is where, a lot of things happen to her.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
But I don't know. This is a great book.
Amazing.
And again, we've read a lot of history.
It doesn't feel like a history book so much.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
But there's so much information.
Like the one when I was reading the Alexander Hamilton and stuff, it's like that stuff, I couldn't read it. I don't know why. But this is just it's somebody's diary. It's somebody's personal story. But it's history, because she had read so many books.
Well, and her parents were so involved in politics too.
Oh, and one time she went with the maid to a demonstration.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
And they got in trouble because they came back late. And their parents had gone to it too, and they never saw each other, but they came back late. And the mother slapped both of them across the face. Wasn't a good thing.
No, it was not.
No, it was. I mean, the maid should have known better, but girl wanted to go, and they're like, yes, let's go.
Well, and I mean, part of them, the maid came to live with the family when she was just a kid. So, part of that too was that they were kind of sisters.
Exactly. And that's kind of, I think, how she saw her until she realized that she wasn't equal.
And I think that was a big part of that realization too, is that, she felt like a sister, but then she couldn't eat dinner with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Which you go, her parents were relatively liberal to a point.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but we're still better than you. You still are in a different class. But the social class
still exists.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
So far as going to the neighbor and saying, hey, just so you know, that's not actually my daughter. That's my maid.
Yes. And she's in a different social class, and you better not date her.
And that was the end of it.
Yeah. He just, the neighbor just hands all these letters. Letters that Margie had actually written.
Right.
Because
right.
the maid was illiterate.
Right.
But, so the book is amazing. If you haven't read it, I mean, it's not new. If you don't want to read the book, watch the movie. I mean, it's.
Why wouldn't you want to read the book? You're listening to a graphic novel podcast. You want to read a graphic novel?
You do. We're going to do both. I mean, we're going to do both.
Absolutely.
We do a lot of TV and movies. So, but these books, this is so good.
It is very good.
This is so good. And I've got so many books to read. I don't even know what to do. I'm keeping up. I'm keeping up on the ones that we're doing for the show, but I just got 6 or 7 new graphic novels.
Yeah, like last week you read like 6 books in 1 week because you have so much time to yourself now.
Yeah, but I decided that Love and Rockets has been around since the 90s since the 80s actually, but since the 90s when I was doing comics TV, and I decided that I wanted to start at the beginning and read the whole thing. So I got the first 6 graphic novels to start reading the whole series. And I've got a lot of reading to do. I've got hundreds and hundreds of pages of comics to read, plus the stuff we're doing. But speaking of comics TV, I've got almost all the episodes ready to upload to YouTube. There's a lot less than I thought. I mean, I might have masters of some of them. I know there's a few that are missing, but I'm not going to. Whatever I have here is what's going up, and that's it. I'm not going out of my way to dig up more stuff. But those will all be up on YouTube. And once in a while, you might check our Twitter. Once in a while, I link one of them. Sometimes when I have interviews with famous people, like I did one with Jim Lee, and there's some other ones. There's Joe Matt. We have one with Peter David, who's very well known. And there's some other ones too. So I'll check out, either look for it on YouTube itself or check our Twitter feed, because sometimes they're in there. Anyhow, until next time, this is the end of this episode. Like we always say, check us out online, visit Apple Podcasts.
Make sure you rank us, give us those 5 stars that we love, share us with your friends, all the fun things.
Yeah, if you leave us a comment, especially a positive one, well, if they're negative, we might read it on. We might read it too.
Yeah, we might make fun of you too. Who knows?
It's possible. And we have gotten some comments. A lot of times they're from creators whose books we do, who are real happy with. We're real happy with the podcast. Just keep telling everybody. Share it with your friends, because
that's how we grow.
That's how we grow. We like doing the show. We like talking to you. So until next time, my name is Mike.
And I'm Parker.
And this is
the Graphic Novel Podcast.